un gars d'ici, être le directeur de général des Canadiens est une occasion d'une vie.
Enjoy the moment, you're in the NHL here.
Working for the Montreal Canadiens is a dream. La plus grande franchise dans la histoire du hockey.
If it was my last day on this planet, and you told me what would you like to do, we want to be in that building on a Saturday night.
Bienvenue tout le monde. Welcome everybody to HABS Therapy Day, a bilingual show for fans who value substance over spectacle. Pas de rumeurs, pas de clickbait, juste de l'analyse sérieuse basée sur les faits. We offer informed, reasoned perspectives on the Canadiens, des points de vue réfléchis, loin du bruit médiatique. If you're looking for honest discussion and real information about the Montreal Canadiens, vous êtes au bon endroit. This is HABS Therapy Day. Let's begin. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the show. We're trying something a little bit different here today. We're going to be going with daytime shows. The shows will be shorter, and we're going to be doing daytime shows. I'm going to try and do something during the day. Hopefully that'll give you guys more of an opportunity to watch. I know it's difficult to compete with Coach Frenchie in the evenings. He's on just about every night, and I know you guys really love to go and watch his show. So I'm going to do shorter shows. I'm going to do them more often, and I'm going to do them during the day, typically around this time of day, noontime-ish, for people in the Eastern time zone. Although I know that I did put out a notification saying that it would be 1 o'clock on Blue Sky. I do have to apologize for that mistake, but the show will be shorter. You'll see down in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a 20-minute timer, basically one period. So each show will be 20 minutes long. We will do our best to stick to that time frame. Once the clock starts, it runs, and then we will run through until the end of the show. That doesn't mean that you can't ask questions or get involved. Certainly will do my best to answer your questions as we go along. We do have content prepared, and we will deal with that. But again, like I said, if you have questions, we'll certainly be more than willing to have a chat about it. So if you're not following us yet, please do so. There's a button down below that allows you to subscribe. There's also a notification bell that means you'll get notified whenever we go live. You can keep an eye out for us. We usually try and put up our thumbnail at least several hours before the show goes live. I'm going to try and do shows every Tuesday and Thursday. That'll be the timing for HABS Therapy Day. Once the season starts, of course, we'll be back to doing HABS After Dark after the games are over. But again, we're going to be trying to do more shows more often and keep them a little bit short and sweet. So if you're here, I see there's a few people watching. If you're watching in a replay, we appreciate that as well. Maybe you can join us live next time. If you do have any questions, put them in the comment section. We do certainly answer our questions as often as we possibly can. I try and answer everybody's questions. If they're, if you're trolling, I probably will ignore you, but otherwise I'm happy to answer your questions. So why don't we get started? I will hit the start button on our timer, and we'll get going. So today's topic, guys, is, does size matter in the NHL? If you are a hockey fan, you don't have to look very far to find somebody who's going to tell you that size is the most important thing in hockey. Whether it's a podcaster, whether it's a broadcaster, whether it's somebody in the media, there's a narrative going around right now that the NHL is all about size. You need to be big to win the Stanley Cup. Look at the Florida Panthers. Everyone's going to try and copy and emulate the Florida Panthers, right? They won the Stanley Cup because they're big and physical and strong. And I got to tell you, I'm not buying into it. I don't buy it. I think that it's a bit of an outdated view. It's an old school traditional view, and I don't think it stands up to the facts. I don't think it's quite an accurate statement. I don't think you need to be big to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think we can look at the statistics. First of all, I mean, last year, the difference between the tallest and the shortest team in the NHL was 3.46 centimeters. So less than 3.5 centimeters. That's like 1.3 inches. So from the tallest average team in the NHL to the shortest, the difference was under an inch and a half, well under an inch and a half. Florida, who won the Stanley Cup last year, was only the 11th tallest team in the NHL at 6'2", or 187.03 centimeters. Montreal, the Canadiens, were one of the shortest teams in the NHL, as you'd expect. They were 28th in the league, but yet they were only, an inch and a half shorter than the Las Vegas Golden Knights, who were the tallest in the team. The Canadiens averaged 6'1", or 185.5 centimeters. Now, as far as weight is concerned, Toronto Maple Leafs, right, the heaviest team in the NHL at 207 pounds average. The smallest in the league was the Philadelphia Flyers at 194 pounds. The difference between the two, less than 5 kilos, right around 10 pounds. Well, a little bit more than 10 pounds. Does anybody think of the Toronto Maple Leafs as being a big, physical, playoff-style hockey team? I don't think we do. And so what does size really have to do with it? The Florida Panthers were only the 25th heaviest team in the NHL last year. They were 197 pounds, or 89.4 kilograms on average. So the Canadiens were 4 pounds heavier at 201 pounds than the Florida Panthers were last year. So this narrative that you have to be big and physical and whatever in the NHL, it doesn't really, the facts don't really support it. So why are we always talking about big players? Why are we always talking about, you need to be big to win in the playoffs. You need to be this, you need to be that. It's just not, it's not the case. So if you look at the graphic here I provided, you see the sizes of the teams in the NHL, and, they're really, first of all, it's not a big difference from the biggest to the smallest. And second of all, the bigger ones are not the ones that are winning. Obviously, you can go back and look at Las Vegas, and they were a big team when they won, and Tampa Bay was a bigger team. But certainly last year, Florida was not one of the biggest teams. But for some reason, the entire hockey world is talking about the Florida Panthers and how, in order to win the Stanley Cup, you have to be a bigger team. You have to be a team that goes out and gets, great big, huge hulking defensemen who are going to beat up the other team and so on and so forth. And it just doesn't really, hold water, that argument. So the other issue, Sam Bennett, right? Sam Bennett is being put forward as some sort of a golden goose for playoff success in the NHL. And certainly he had a great playoff this year, winning the Conn Smythe and scoring 15 goals and what have you. But Sam Bennett is 6'1", 194 pounds. He's not a big guy. And frankly, other than this year's playoff performance, and, he's not been that spectacular a hockey player. So again, I'm not sure where this narrative's coming from. As far as applying this to the Montreal Canadiens, we can look at, the debate that went on when the Montreal Canadiens were eliminated from the playoffs by the Washington Capitals. Again, every commentator that you tripped over was telling you that the reason the Canadiens lost was because they were too small, right? They weren't physical enough. They weren't big enough. They couldn't compete with the big players on the Washington Capitals. The Washington Capitals came in and bullied the Canadiens, and they took advantage of Montreal because of their size, and they hit them right and they hit them left, and Montreal, wasn't able to respond, and Montreal, wasn't big enough to play, playoff hockey with the Washington Capitals. Well, bullshit. It's not true, right? Washington was only marginally bigger than the Montreal Canadiens last year when it came to height. 1.2 centimeters taller on average, or less than half an inch. They were only marginally heavier than the Montreal Canadiens, right? 0.17 kilograms heavier on average than the Canadiens. 0.37 pounds, or roughly 6 ounces, right? The weight of one hockey puck, right? So this big bullying behemoth of a hockey team that came in and beat up the Montreal Canadiens last year and knocked them out of the playoffs in 5 games and sort of ran roughshod over the Montreal Canadiens was half an inch taller on average and the weight of one hockey puck heavier on average than the Montreal Canadiens, right? So the Canadiens did not lose that series because they weren't as big as the Washington Capitals. The Canadiens don't have to go out and get bigger if they want to succeed in the playoffs. That's not what the Canadiens need to do. They're already, on the the larger half of the league when it comes to weight. Obviously, height-wise, they're not there, and they probably won't get there with some of the shorter players they have. But certainly, they did not lose to the Washington Capitals last year because of their size. In fact, if you go back and look at the games, the Canadiens actually out-hit the Washington Capitals in the first round playoff series last year, right? They out-hit the Capitals in 3 of the 5 games. The first 2 games, the Capitals out-hit the Canadiens, and in the last 3 games, the Canadiens out-hit the Washington Capitals. Overall for the series, the Canadiens had 184 hits, and the Washington Capitals had only 160. So where is this? Where is this team that run roughshod over the Montreal Canadiens, or beat them up, or dominated them physically and made them, just dominated them, like took over the game physically and did all that? It's just it's crazy. Like there's people are looking for a narrative, and they're looking for something to talk about, and at the end of that series, they were looking for a reason why the Canadiens lost. And it wasn't because they weren't too big, and it wasn't because they're not physical enough. Montreal averaged 36.5 hits per game in the playoffs last year. That's more than Washington. That's more than Dallas. And it's more than Edmonton, right? Edmonton makes it to the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row. And the Canadiens significantly out-hit the Edmonton Oilers when it came to hits per game in the playoffs, both this year, of course not last year because the Canadiens were in the playoffs last year. So again, where is this narrative going? Where is this narrative that people keep wanting to talk about? Where is this narrative or where's the support for this narrative that everybody seems to have, that the Canadiens need to get bigger, or that in order to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs, you need to be bigger, right? Not one defenseman under 6 feet was drafted in this year's NHL draft. Like where is all of that coming from? You've got to have big, strong, burly defensemen in order to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs in the NHL. So if we go back again and look at the series between Washington and Montreal, right? We're continuously told that small defensemen can't succeed in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So last year in the playoffs, the player who was hit the most on the Montreal Canadiens in that series was Alex Carrier. Not the smallest defenseman. Not a big defenseman by any means, but not the smallest on the team. Caden Gooley next, right? Carrier took 26 hits in the series against Washington. Caden Gooley, there were 24 hits on Caden Gooley. Again, not the small defenseman, right? Not the guy who everybody thought, or the type of guy who everybody thought wouldn't be able to play in the Stanley Cup playoffs, right? Mike Matheson, 15 hits in the series against the Washington Capitals. Lane Hudson, right? The little small rookie who isn't big enough to play NHL hockey and isn't big enough to play playoff hockey in the NHL. Only 13 hits against, right? So half as many hits as Alexandre Carrier, right? Like it's like so this narrative again that you need to be big and that small defensemen can't thrive in the playoffs, again, it's thrown out the window, right? Lane Hudson can play hockey. He knows what he's doing. He can avoid hits. He can get away from the hits. He uses his speed. He uses his mobility to get away from those hits. So you can succeed in the NHL as a smaller player, and you can succeed in the NHL as a smaller defenseman. Most points by the Montreal Canadiens in the series against Washington. Who was it? Right? Who had the most points for Montreal in the playoffs last year? Well, the answer is Lane Hudson. 5 points in 5 games. Who's next? Cole Caulfield, right? 5'9" Cole Caulfield. 5'10" Lane Hudson. These were the Canadiens' leaders in the playoffs last year in points. Hudson with 5, Caulfield with 4. No one else on the team had more than 2. Right? So again, the narrative that you need to be big to win in the playoffs or to succeed in the playoffs is out the window. So again, I don't want to harp on this, but again, there just seems to be a real obsession amongst commentators and people in the media and people in the mainstream media, as well as the bloggers and the podcasters and whatever, that size is everything, right? We saw it in the draft this year. I mean, even NHL teams are buying into it. So I don't really get it, and I wanted to take the time here to address it and maybe see what you guys thought about it, and give me your thoughts and let me know what you guys think about it, and why it is that everybody seems to think that size is so important in the NHL, when the facts don't really seem to be there to support it. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there's always a benefit to size, and big hockey players have their place, and big hockey players can do things on the ice that smaller hockey players can't do. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. But again, the suggestion that you must be big or you must be a certain way in order to, or that there's some sort of a formula for success in the playoffs, I don't think that makes any sense. And I think that a GM who realizes that can certainly take advantage of that and use it to his advantage, by again abandoning these old school traditional hockey principles and looking for things that are more based in fact and evidence. So why did the Canadiens lose to Washington last year? I mean, the answer for me is experience, right? It wasn't so much that they weren't physical enough. It's that they weren't able to handle the physicality that was brought against them, right? They weren't able to deal with the tempo and the pace and the reality of playoff hockey. Not because they weren't big enough, not because they weren't physical enough, not because they weren't strong enough, but because they weren't experienced enough. They'd never been there before, right? They didn't know how to respond to the physicality that a veteran, largely veteran, or at least sort of more veteran than Montreal, Washington Capitals team brought. There was if you were watching Coach Frenchie's show last night, there was a really good point made by one of the commenters named Nicholas Lund. And he said, it's not about being physical, it's about knowing how to handle the physicality. And I think that's important, and that's experience, right? Right? If you've been there before, and you've experienced it before, and you know what it feels like, and you know what it looks like, and you know all of that, you're more able to respond to it, or you're more able to handle it, or you're more able to take it in stride, right? So with more experience, the Canadiens will know how to deal better with a player like Tom Wilson, right? When a player like Tom Wilson comes out and tries to steamroll everybody, the Canadiens will know how to handle that, right? Arbor Jacki will be better at going out and dealing with Tom Wilson, right? Without taking penalties, without being stupid, without, disadvantaging or putting the team in a bad spot. He'll, really the only player last year who seemed to be able to take care of Tom Wilson was Josh Anderson. And he did a quite good job of it, but, he wasn't able to do it, on his own. Like, the Canadiens won't be put off by that type of play the next time they see it, because they've been there before, right? They won't get off their game. They won't, take bad penalties. They won't get intimidated. They're not going to respond adversely or negatively to that kind of play. They're also not going to, respond negatively to the refereeing. And again, I'm not blaming the series on the referees. The referees did not lose the series for the Montreal Canadiens, but there is a different style of officiating in the NHL. A lot more is allowed. You get away with a lot more in the playoffs for the most part. But the refereeing is also inconsistent in the playoffs. The referees are always, have, different agendas from game to game often, whether it's, keeping the game clean or what have you. And, as an experienced hockey team, you're better able to respond to that. You're better able to know, what are the referees doing tonight? What are we going to get away with, and what are we not going to get away with? And, so, I think the Canadiens, especially in those first two games of the series, weren't able to adapt or adjust to the fact that the referees were letting the teams play very physical hockey and allowing the teams to get away with things that probably wouldn't have been allowed in the regular season. And so, I think that, as they move into, the years to come, and, guys like Gouli and guys like Jacki and guys like Slavkovsky and, right down the lineup, get more experience and understand what playoff hockey is all about, they'll be able to deal with that significantly better, right? Like Alexandre Carrier getting run over by Tom Wilson wasn't because the team is too small. It wasn't because they weren't physical enough. We've already seen that they out-hit, the Capitals and were just as big. But, the Canadiens just weren't prepared to know how to deal with the way that Tom Wilson was playing. And experience will allow them to do that. Experience will allow them to adapt to the physicality of playoff, the pace, everything of playoff hockey. Nick Suzuki was injured. Again, not an excuse, but a fact. Your leader, your captain, one of your few playoff experienced players certainly wasn't at 100%. And, that certainly affected things as well. We've seen Suzuki be somebody who is able to set the tone physically. Despite not being the biggest player in the league or even the biggest player on the team, he certainly is able to set that tone when necessary, and he wasn't able to do that, in the playoff series against Washington last year. So, again, getting back to the question, is size really a defining factor in the NHL? Should teams be bending over backwards just so they can get bigger? Again, we mentioned it earlier. This year's draft, not a single defenseman in the entire draft under 6 feet tall was selected by any NHL team, right? Not one. Like, not a single defenseman under 6 feet tall. This despite the fact that the two best defensemen in the NHL are both under 6 feet tall, right? Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, both under 6 feet tall, right? Cale Makar right around 5'11", and Quinn Hughes right around 5'9" or 5'10". The two, clearly the two best defensemen in the league. And that's not to say that there was a Quinn Hughes or a Cale Makar in this year's draft. I don't know if there was. Time will tell. But, clearly you can succeed with smaller defensemen. Lane Hudson won the Rookie of the Year this year at 5'10". Adam Fox is under 6 feet tall. Erik Karlsson under 6 feet tall. There's lots of defensemen out there who are very successful in the NHL, despite not being 6 feet taller or bigger. So I think that if you are buying into this notion or this narrative that you must be a certain size in order to play in the NHL or to succeed in the NHL, I think, as a general manager, I think you do your team a disservice. And I think we're fortunate in Montreal to have, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton, who don't seem to buy into a lot of these traditional notions. They're willing to go against the grain, and they're willing to do what they believe is the right thing to do rather than what the league seems to be telling them. It's and it's good, and I think you can take advantage of certain traditional views and be a better team because of it, if you are willing to sort of take a more evidence-based approach to these things. If you're willing to take a chance on a smaller player like LJ Mooney, drafted in the 80s this year. That's not to say he's going to be an NHL, and not every small player can, translate or adapt to the NHL, but neither can every big player, right? Michael McCarron, right? We remember the Canadiens drafting, Jared Tenorti and Michael McCarron, based on their size, these great, big, huge guys, and they did nothing, right? Cameron, I'm drawing a blank, Schultz this year? Schwartz. Vancouver Giants. Can't think of his name off. Widely regarded as having the best shot and being the best skater in the entire draft. Like, almost consensus. Everyone would say that at least he was in the top 3 in both of those categories. Not drafted until the 50s because he's 5'8", right? Like, and again, I'm not saying he's gonna make it to the NHL. Berkeley Catton last year, he did manage to get drafted in the top 10, but he would have gone much higher if he was taller than, I think he was 5'10". So this is what I'm talking about. And I'm not saying for a minute that size isn't a factor and size shouldn't be a consideration. And if you've got a guy who's got all the talent in the world and he's 6'3", 6'4", yeah, that's awesome. But the idea of taking somebody based only on size, or not taking somebody because they're smaller, I think is a huge mistake that a lot of fans are certainly falling into that trap, and even coaches and GMs are sort of going down that road. But when you as a fan, when you're ranting and raving in the comment sections and in the forums about the Canadiens need more size, the Canadiens need to get bigger. Well, remember that they were every bit as big as the Washington Capitals last year. They were every bit as physical as the Washington Capitals last year. They out-hit the Washington Capitals last year, and they still lost the series. So it's not about size. It's not about physicality. It's about experience. It's about having players who have a high compete level. It's about players who are committed, players who are like playing with each other, players who will go to the wall for one another, and creating a team environment where the guys are willing to do everything that it takes to win a series, to win a game, to win the cup. It's not about how big you are. It's not about how tall you are, how much you weigh. What's the old expression? It's not about the dog in the fight. It's about the fight in the dog. I mean, I know that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but it's true. And I think that's another thing that the Canadiens are doing very well is they're creating a team environment and a culture and an identity, which is something that I think is worth copying from the Florida Panthers. Right? It's if you're emulating the Florida Panthers, it's not all about getting bigger and stronger. It's about being, creating a culture and creating an identity that is made for playoff hockey, right? Creating an identity where you have players who play hard, who play for each other, who have no quit in them, who, compete at a high level. Sam Bennett, right? It's not Sam Bennett's size that makes him a great playoff hockey player. It's the way he plays. It's his compete level. It's the way he turns up his volume when the games mean the most. So I'm really happy personally that the Canadiens are not falling into this trap of focusing too much on size. They're focusing on identity, culture, environment, making Montreal a place where people want to play. I'm very happy about that, and you should be too. There you go, guys. There's the show. That's it. That's the new format for HABS Derby Day. I hope that you enjoyed it. No questions or comments on YT. There were a couple over on TikTok that I noticed. One in particular about whether the Canadiens should go after Jordan Kyrou. I don't believe they should go after Jordan Kyrou. I think that they're set on the wing, I think, right now, and for what it would take to get Kyrou, I don't think it would be worth it. I also don't think that the Canadiens are really interested in Kyrou. The Canadiens have made it very clear that they're not going to move on from any of their established players or high-level prospects in order to return anybody, let alone a Jordan Kyrou. I don't think they need Kyrou at this point. He's not a center; he's a winger. I just don't think that it would be worth the assets to bring a guy like Kyrou. And personally, for me, I like developing the players that we already have rather than bringing in players from outside. That's not to say that we can't make trades from time to time, or they can't make trades from time to time that help the team. The Dobson trade, the Bolduc trade certainly do that, but those are trades of opportunity. I don't think the Canadiens are out there shopping players around trying to do something. Again, I think they're involved with any moves that are being talked about, but they're not trying to push the envelope unnecessarily. They're not trying to move on from anything. Evan over on TikTok says, I think we should trade Kirby. I think you're absolutely wrong, Evan. I disagree with you completely. Kirby Dach is a potentially very good centerman in the NHL. He's got time left on his contract. He doesn't have a lot of trade value at the moment. And there's a possibility that he would show up at camp next year, hopefully in much better shape and ready to play, and could be a very good player for the Canadiens. If Kirby Dach plays up to his capabilities and up to his potential and the way he played 3 years ago, the Montreal Canadiens have no concerns at 2C. In fact, they would have one of the better 2C second-line centermen in the entire NHL. and one of the better groups down the middle in the entire NHL. That's not to say it's going to happen, but again, I think the idea of trading him at this stage is kind of crazy a little bit. So that's it for the show, guys. Zach's excited for Pizzetta. I would be too. Great little player for you, Zachary. I wouldn't expect too much from him, and as far as production is concerned. But certainly, you're getting a guy who is going to give his best each and every time he's on the ice, and will be a fantastic team guy. He was spectacular in that regard for the Montreal Canadiens, and I think there's no reason to believe he wouldn't be the same for the Maple Leafs next year. So I would be excited for him as well, Zachary, as long as your expectations aren't too high. I don't think you're going to see a guy who goes out and scores a ton of goals or creates a lot of offense, but you're certainly going to get a team guy who, again, culture in Toronto is lacking a little bit, and I think he's the kind of guy who can bring some of that to the Maple Leafs. So you can look forward to that. So that's it for today, guys. I do appreciate everybody for coming by. Thank you so much. If you're not subscribed, like I said, hit the button down below. You can hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed the show. You can hit the notification bell if you want to get notified when we go live. If you're watching a replay, then you can certainly do that as well. Send us your questions, and we'll definitely get back to you. We'll respond for sure. If you, sorry, Aiden, the short answer is no, but I certainly invite you to go back and watch the show. Again, it's just a short one, guys. We're doing, 20-minute periods. We're going to go on the air more often during the day in particular to do the show. That's sort of the new format we're doing. So, like I said, hit that notification bell. You will get notified when we go live. Please subscribe. Help us grow our community so that we can have a place where you guys and I can talk about the Canadiens in a bit of an intelligent way and get away from a lot of the noise and the rumors and the clickbait going on with the Montreal Canadiens media this time of year. So go back and check it out, Aiden. It's only about 20 minutes long. If you want to watch the show, you'll get your answer. You'll see what I think about it, and if you agree, let me know, and if you disagree, let me know in the comments as well, and we'll discuss it. So that's it for now, guys. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.
Pour un gars d'ici, être le directeur de général des Canadiens est une occasion d'une vie.
Enjoy the moment, you're in the NHL here.
Working for the Montreal Canadiens is a dream. La plus grande franchise dans la histoire du hockey.
If it was my last day on this planet, and you told me what would you like to do, I want to be in that building on a Saturday night.